Well, folks, the 2020 sled season is fast approaching, so I figured it was time we did our first Tracks edition of Tracks and Wheels. So what you're about to see is a top-end refresh that I did on this machine. This is not going to be a step-by-step tutorial on this kind of job, more of just an overview of what to expect if you're thinking about taking on a project like this. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope it's helpful to someone. Welcome to the first Tracks-oriented episode of Tracks and Wheels. Today we're going to be doing a top-end rebuild on this sled, which is a 2013 Polaris 800 Switchback Pro R. Just a quick refresh, which means we're going to leave the crankcase and everything in the machine. We're just going to pull the head and cylinder off and replace the pistons and rings. So as you can see, we've already got the plastics off the front. So right now we're just going to focus on getting access to the engine, which is going to involve removing the oil tank. These frame members here, which can be removed, and remove the exhaust on this side, and make room so that we can get in there and pull the cylinder out. Okay, so we've got the oil tank out, that clutch cover plate there, which had the CDI box and the voltage regulator kind of attached with it as well. We've got that out. We've pulled out the exhaust system. I was able to flip all the wiring harness up here and just fully remove the A-frame out of the way with the coils still on. So that gives us plenty of room to work. So now we're going to start disconnecting stuff from the cylinder. Probably start with coolant lines, then fuel rail, and then we should be able to take the cylinder off with the exhaust valves and everything still on it. So we started by disconnecting coolant where the thermostat is. Pulled the thermostat out, just tucked the coolant line up out of the way, and we're going to siphon out as much coolant as we can out of the head before we go ahead and disconnect the other lines and start taking the head up. So, as you can see, I got on a bit of a roll and didn't film at each step, but we've got the top end completely off. So basically, after siphoning off some coolant through the thermostat hole, pop the head off, and some additional coolant in top of the head, siphon that off. Took the head cover off, siphoned off what was left inside the head, then popped the head off, and siphoned off what was left, what I could in the jackets here on the pistons. Then took out the piston bolts, and actually as soon as I loosened it off a little bit, air got into the coolant, and this sort of filled back up with some more coolant. So siphoned the rest of that off and got that all ready. Disconnected the fuel rail right here, and the injectors. That all came, fuel rail and injectors come off in one piece, but I have it apart here because I was checking some other stuff. And then I was able to lift the cylinder assembly off with the exhaust valves and manifold still attached, no problem. And of course that then exposed the pistons. Pulled the piston wrist pins, took the old pistons off, and as you can see, they've got some coolant on them. That's why they're wet, but you can see that they're pretty toasty, but not any signs of, you know, real damage. Just good wear. And this motor's got over 9,000 K on it, and there's a couple of vertical lines, but those vertical lines don't transfer to the cylinder. The cylinder's looking pretty good. Still showing a bit of crosshatch, and haven't seen any major signs of any damage. So basically a good time to redo this motor, where it's, you know, pistons are well worn, the rings are worn, but no damage before it blew up. Fixing it's a lot easier before it blows up than afterwards. So we got a new piston kit on the way. Hopefully we'll have it in a couple of days, and we'll start to reverse the process. So we've got the cylinder relatively cleaned up. Took the Scotch-Brite pad to the top, got rid of any old gasket material inside the cylinder itself with the Scotch-Brite pad to get rid of any carbon buildup. Just a light cleaning. Cylinders are in good shape, so no big deal there. Cleaned all the heavy carbon off the head, and now we're cleaning the exhaust valves. So we've got the exhaust valves out. Seem to be everything's in good shape, not getting any blow by on the back side of the bellows, but definitely could use some cleaning. They're carboned up and sticky. And you can probably see on the back side, on the inside of the bellows, is carboned up. So we're going to clean those up with some solvent, and then shoot them with some brake clean. I got one over here in the solvent tank already, getting her cleaned up. As you can see, once you get the gunk off, got a little bit more brushing to go. You might have some actual hard carbon buildup there that we'll need the Scotch-Brite pad to clean that up, and we'll get them looking like new. And we'll also clean up the ports on the cylinder as well now that they're opened up. Get all the carbon and old gummy oil out of there. Okay, so it's been a couple of days. We're back in the shop. We were waiting for new wrist pin bearings. They don't come in the kit. The old ones weren't bad, but you know, you got it all apart. They're like, you know, $15 to $25 a piece. Might as well do it while you got it apart. So we got wrist pin bearings in now, so we should have everything we need to do a reassembly. So already what I've done is I've done the final cleaning on the cylinder. which included a couple dunks in some soapy water. Blow it off with the air compressor, let it sit. I've put a little 2-cycle oil on the cylinder surfaces right now. I've just got some vests and a little spray bottle here. Coat that so that's done. It doesn't get any little oxidization starting on it. And also the exhaust valves have had a final cleaning, and we're going to start reassembling. We'll put the exhaust valves back in, and then the exhaust manifold, and then we'll switch over to the crank on the machine. We'll put the new wrist pin bearings, pistons, which have the rings already gapped, end gap checked and installed. Reassemble that on the block, and then it'll be sliding it all back together. We've got exhaust manifold, exhaust valves reinstalled on the cylinder, torqued to manufacturer spec, new gaskets on both, and everything is ready to go. The only thing, I'm not going to install gaskets, or I also have new bushings for the fuel injectors. I won't put those on until it's in the machine so that they don't get messed up. And new pistons are on the crank, new bearings and pins. And when you're doing that, always cover your crank with a rag or something in case one of your clips goes flying. This is also a good time to check the crankcase for any, excess of coolant or any foreign objects that might have fallen in there during this process. Make sure there's nothing in there. And everything has gotten a coating of 2-cycle oil as we've gone along. I haven't fully coated the pistons yet. I'll do that just before we lower the cylinder down onto them. And that's where I'm going to pause, because I need another set of hands to do that next step. Once we've got the cylinder, making sure that we put our new gasket on before we lower the cylinder down onto the pistons. Once we've got that down, we can continue on as a one-man show, locking everything down and getting everything reconnected. Okay, so we've got the cylinder back on the crankcase, and everything seems to be running smooth. New gasket between the two, bolts torqued according to the manual. I went ahead and put the fuel rail on first before putting the head on, just a little bit more room to work. So fuel rail is back on, new seals for the injectors, torque to spec. I've put my new head gasket, cylinder O-rings in place. We're going to set the head on and torque it down. Okay, so we've set the head in place, new gasket and O-rings around the spark plug holes. Now we're going to set our head cover on. And we'll go ahead and put our bolts in, torque it down, and then we can put the thermostat back on. We've we've got a little customization here. I sanded the powder coat, the paint off of the Liberty there just to make it show up a little bit better, as a little reminder that this engine's been rebuilt already. So that pretty much takes care of the primary engine rebuild. Everything is reassembled, torqued up. Got the old plugs in here just to plug the holes while I reassemble the rest of the machine, which is airbox, exhaust system, and then wiring. So we've got her all back together as far as the primary engine and then the engine compartment reassembly, wiring. So all that remains is to refill fluids, that is oil and coolant on the other side. Try to bleed those systems to make sure that the fluids are immediately available, no air traps, and then see if it fires up. Well, that's it. She's back together. Got the hood on it. I've primed the oil and the coolant a little bit just by rolling it over a few times by hand. I don't have a battery in it right now, so I'm just pull starting it. I would say moment of truth, but it actually already started up. I wasn't expecting it to start so easily, but it did. So I ran it for a couple seconds and then shut it down. I'm just going to try her one more time.